A bipartisan group of 42 state attorneys general is suing Meta, arguing the social media company designed features on Instagram and other apps to purposefully addict children and teens. Up to 95% of teens 13 to 17 report using a social media platform, with more than a third saying they use social media almost constantly. Joining me now are the chair and vice chair of the National Governors Association, Republican Governor Spencer Cox of Utah, and Democratic Governor Jared Polis of Colorado. Their Disagree Better initiative is an effort to encourage civil dialogue among leaders. Welcome to Meet the Press, both of you.
Thank you.
Well, let's start by talking. It is great to have you both here. Let's start by talking about the youth mental health crisis. The Surgeon General, as you know, has called it the defining public health issue of our time. Governor Cox, I want to start with you. Do you agree with the Surgeon General?
I absolutely agree with the Surgeon General, and I want to give a quick shout out to Governor Phil Murphy of New Jersey, who was the former chair of the National Governors Association, who took this issue on as his initiative for a year. We absolutely believe this is the issue of our time. We have seen a 63% increase in persistent loneliness and sadness among young women, especially over the past 10 to 12 years in the state of Utah. We have seen, again, suicide rates going up, depression, anxiety, self-harm rates skyrocketing, and what we know also is it corresponds with social media becoming ubiquitous and cell phones becoming ubiquitous with our teenagers. Those numbers you cited from the Surgeon General are deeply troubling and really sad. We have to take control of this.
We are going to talk about social media, and I appreciate your bringing it up. But Governor Polis, let me just have you weigh in on how the Surgeon General has characterized the enormity of this crisis.
Well, I think people of all ages are facing increased pressure and stress from a lot of causes, especially coming out of the pandemic. In Colorado, we have an I Matter program that provides free counseling sessions for every student in our schools. And we've had over 51,000 sessions with young people who often don't know where to turn and don't know how to access the professional help they need to avoid depression, anxiety, risk of self-harm. We think it's helping, but the need is great to make sure that people of all ages have access to the mental health support services they need to thrive.
All right, let's talk about social media as it relates to our youth. Governor Cox, you have put a lot of blame, as you just did here, on social media. And in fact, Utah became the first state in the nation to actually pass legislation designed to limit teens' use of social media. Why do you think that was the right move, and what do you think it's accomplished so far?
Well, look, again, we want to be data-driven in all of this. So we've been working with experts across the country, the smartest people that have looked at all of the data, all of the research, and have concluded, and again, I think it's obvious to anyone who spends any time on social media or has kids. I have 4 kids. I've seen what's happened to them as they've spent time on social media and their friends, that this is absolutely causing these terrible increases, these hockey stick-like increases that we are seeing in anxiety, depression, and self-harm amongst our youth. By the way, it's bad for adults too, but especially bad for our young people. And so, look, if you saw a 63% increase in cancer amongst young women in our country, we would be moving heaven and earth to do anything possible to change that. And yet we've kind of just sat on our hands and said, well, I guess this is the new normal. That's unacceptable in Utah. And so we passed the most aggressive legislation in the country to hold social media companies accountable. We're still in the process of implementing that. We've sued Meta. We've sued TikTok. We're taking a page. They've taken a page, sadly, out of the tobacco lobby. They know this is harming our kids. They're covering it up. They're doing everything possible to take advantage of our kids for their own gain. And we're not going to stand for that. And so we're still pushing forward. We don't know what the results are yet, but we're confident we're going to do everything we can to protect our kids.
Governor Cox, is there anything to be gained from social media? For example, could kids find a sense of community there? Could they find a sense of identity there? Do you see any upside to it?
Sure. Yes, there's definitely upside to social media when used properly and in the correct ways. But see, that's not how these apps are designed, and that's the problem. They're designed to addict our kids very intentionally, and these addictive features make it impossible for our kids to get the upside, the benefit out of that without all of the downside. And again, the access that they get to just terrible content, the rabbit holes that they end up going down, these algorithms that are destroying lives, and so somebody has to step in. We're not trying to ban social media completely from our kids. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to make it safe for our kids.
Governor Polis, would you be open to more restrictions on social media in your state?
I think the responsibility belongs with parents, not the government. I have a 12-year-old and a 9-year-old. We don't allow them on social media yet. We'll be having the conversation with our 12-year-old son soon, and in an appropriate way, allowing them to access that. But I think really fundamentally the state can't be the parents for kids. I certainly agree with the diagnosis that Governor Cox did, and I have some sympathy for that approach. But I do think at the end of the day, the government can't parent kids. It's really up to the responsibility of parents to step up. And I think it's in many ways an educational effort for outreach to parents. Many parents don't understand the full threat of different social media for their kids, and I think more parents need to step up and take on that responsibility.
Let's talk about a recent study by the CDC which found students who identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, or non-heterosexual are about 2 times more likely than their heterosexual peers to feel persistently sad or hopeless, and almost 1 in 4 attempted suicide during this previous year. Governor Polis, how big of a crisis is that? How do you address that piece of this?
So first of this, in your question to Governor Cox about the upside of social media, there's a great potential for finding community there. Imagine growing up the only gay kid in a conservative rural community, thinking you're the only person in the world, and finding that there's others like you facing the same issues you face, being able to work through those issues with them. So there are upsides to this community, but there's also a need to show that we accept and love everybody. Schools educate everybody, regardless of who you are or who you love, in every part of the state and every part of the country. And that we need to make sure we meet the learning needs and the social emotional needs of every student.
Well, Governor Cox, Utah has joined 21 other states across the country banning gender-affirming care for minors, including hormone treatments. What do you say to members of the medical community, families, kids who identify as being transgender, who say that this type of gender-affirming care actually benefits their mental health, makes them feel less sad and less depressed?
Well, I would say that there's still debate in the medical community about whether or not that's actually true. And so we put a pause on those surgeries and those hormone therapies until we can get more information, until that debate can be better settled, that we're not actually doing more harm to these young people than good. I want to respond to something that the Governor Polis said, because I think it's important. I too believe that parents should be responsible for social media, and it's the parents who are asking us for help. They're desperate to get more help, because what these companies have done, have found ways to get around parents. And so what we're providing is more tools for parents. We're not trying as government to parent these kids. We want parents to actually have control over what their kids are able to do with social media.
I want to end on a personal note with both of you. And Governor Cox, I'll start with you, because you just hopefully heard my conversation with Senator Fetterman. The male suicide rate is 4 times higher than it is for women, and men make up about 80% of all suicides. And Governor Cox, you've talked about experiencing suicidal thoughts when you were younger. Can you share with us, what do you think made the difference for you?
Yeah, I have, and I want to be just very open and transparent with this. When I was a teenager, my parents got divorced. I was really struggling. I thought the world would be a better place without me, and I was very fortunate to be surrounded by good people, good friends, good family who cared deeply about me and got me the help that I needed. And here's what I want to say. As dark as it was at that time, I am so glad I stayed. And to anybody listening out there, teenagers, men, women, anybody, we need you to stay. There is help available. 988, you can call that helpline right now. Please stay. We need all of you. Life is worth living, and it does get better. It gets so much better.
Governor Polis, I want to give you the last word on this, and we know that suicide by firearms is also increasing. What is your message to people who are struggling in this new year?
And there's small things that policy can do to help. We added a waiting period in Colorado, 3 days to purchase a weapon, at least to help eliminate those impulse suicides, get people to think about it, guns being one of the major tools that are used in suicide. But I think the key thing is destigmatizing it, talking about it. We all know people in our lives that ended their lives that way. My best childhood friend's brother committed suicide. And I think the first thing to do is to talk about it, because for too long, suicide was swept under the rug, not discussed. People were left to suffer alone in their own silos. And I think breaking down those barriers, having that discussion, making sure people have access to the help that they need when they need it is a critical piece of reducing the suicide rate.
Well, this is such an important conversation, such critical information. Governors Cox and Polis, thank you both so much for sharing your very personal perspectives and also policy perspectives on this. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.